forge has gone quiet, the bellows blow no more. The forge has gone quiet, the smiths have gone home. Only fading embers remain, and my hearth grows cold. One kiss from you to rekindle it all.
Okay, so welcome to session 0 of our new campaign. This is an adventure we'll be playtesting for release in 2019 that is tentatively titled The Queen of Embers. So no one around the table knows what this is about. I have been rewriting it in association with the original author named Sammy, so shout out to that guy. For those of you who have probably read a little bit about this adventure online, but it's never really been seen in public, we are lucky enough to have Sammy as a partner with the Grim Imperial Studios, and we're going through the motions to integrate it into my home campaign world. So for those of you who listened in previously to the Dun Hollow Mystery, you may hear some names and places and characters and gods and people that may sound familiar. For those of you around the table, you will probably recognize where this game is taking place. So a little bit of background for our listeners. So I've been running the same kind of game for the past 20-odd years. Tim Coron, who's the dude in the Chief shirt, he's been one of the longest-running players with us, besides Walter Fulbright, who's not here tonight. And
Adam's been here for too.
But
longest continuous, not
that's
longest
right.
Run.
Continuous.
Not longest run.
Right. In fact, it was Tim Coron who'd actually talked me back into gaming again. Tim Coron and Walter Fulbright. After I took a little 2-year hiatus, girlfriend, blah blah blah. Anyway, that being said, we are going to actually run this game in my campaign world, which is called Mahal. Specifically, we're going to run this game in a country or a region of a country called the Rovain Girdle. A little bit of background on that. So the Rovain Girdle is kind of a proxy country for an even larger country called Aglador, which has just recently, in the year 223, formed a kind of a unifying front, a empire, if you will, between countries simply called the Dominion. That includes Hivernia, parts of Dumbrud, the Duchy of Mahals at the south, where the Eridane had conquered the Gothric folk and ran them out of Vecnos Point. But our story will be very hyper-focused in the Rovain Girdle, specifically around the city of Durindal, which in our campaign world is kind of a large, burgeoning pioneer city that has been built along the sides of these very iron-rich hills, specifically rich in saltpeter. In this game world, gunpowder, or we call it pyre shot in my game, is brought from all these places around Durindal and kind of forged here. So Durindal holds kind of a special place within the greater campaign world, almost as great as the southern city of Cahabro. But we decided to do it here because it's familiar territory for many of us who played around the table. A lot of us have characters in previous campaigns who will come up in this story. Mm-hmm. We get to see kind of what happened to characters we've actually played in historic campaigns come back to light. What place they now are in the world around us as NPCs. And I felt that the Rovain Girdle made a lot of sense because, one, it's a little bit urban focused, but we'll also have some wilderness travel. A lot of politics and intrigue, which will be fun, but it will be, much like the Dun Hollow Mystery, an investigative adventure. Specifically, because this adventure is being used as a frame-up for a new system, which we'll be releasing in a future book called For Factions, we will be slowly introducing some of those mechanics as we play along. Okay. But the faction that the players around the table will be part of is a group called the Dufresne Agency. Which has been kind of a central to some of the games we've ran historically.
Can I say something, Dan? You know,
please,
one of the things I really enjoy about a lot of your games is just the amount of history and, you know, lore and backstory. And all this 2 decades of history that we've all developed together, and I feel like in these podcasts people miss out on some of that. So I feel like whenever we have something like a character, a recurring character, or some sort of like group that has like a lot of lore surrounding it, maybe we can like after the game like maybe do a bit of a deep dive into like some of this extra history to like give people context for like where some of these big names come from, or something like the Dufresne Agency, like what's the history behind it and stuff like that. I feel like if we can help flesh out the world a little bit more, people would get a lot more enjoyment out of it.
I am glad you mentioned that, Nick. Nick has played this for quite some time. As a matter of fact, Adam and Mike have an answer to this.
Yes, we do.
What's that? Huh?
So how about you both tell us a little bit about what we're planning to do during this, not only play testing a new adventure for Zweihander, but how to talk about the world to listeners.
Well, if you're seeing this episode, then you may already know, but
spoilers.
Basically, we're going to be starting up the Grim and Perilous Podcast Patreon.
Oh.
And as some of the reward tiers that we have down, but still need to be truly finalized, will be some of these background footage that they can watch, such as the Session Zero. Such as like maybe some of the side conversations that we have before we start the game. An inside sneak peek into how we do things.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when we really nerd out, guys,
Right.
about
Like how we talked about Chinese farmers earlier for about like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
we super nerd out usually before we turn the cameras
I
on.
think in one part of this too, excuse me, but in the Grim Perilous Podcast, one thing we do plan to do is specifically what Nick mentioned, like, tell me more about the Covenant. Like, in my campaign world, the Covenant is the faith of the world. We're going to talk about that on our Patreon through Patreon-only posts, which will eventually be released into a campaign world book, which I've been itching to do for a long time, but just haven't had quite the discipline for it because we had a lot of other stuff going on.
Absolutely.
But yes, to that point, we will be slowly kind of revealing all these things to our patrons over time, which will eventually be brought together into this yet unnamed book. But within that book will be the Queen of Embers and the background around the girl, and more about the Covenant, and more about the characters and minor NPCs and major NPCs, up to and including a timeline of events that kind of led to this, because, as Nick has mentioned, everyone around the table has played in this game for quite some time, and because we start and stop campaigns and continue a few years forward in the future, but they get kind of see how their characters, but their choices, how they kind of grew in the world and how it changed the world too. Because we are strong believers in, like, once a game is over, those characters become a part of the ongoing story and are revisited somehow within the story. So we're going to see some recurring characters that people around the table, other people who are not playing with us currently, have played over the last 2 decades, come back to life, and we will certainly talk more about them and let our listeners begin to understand a little bit more about the world of Mahal, up to and including that which is around this adventure. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So we see an appearance of LG2.
Lynn and Genevieve too?
Oh.
Lynn and Genevieve has a ton of bastards out there.
Oh yeah, well, maybe that would be LG the youngest, because Lyndon Genevieve, a character I used to play, and actually somebody that's called out several times in Zweihander, was actually Lyndon Genevieve the younger, named after his father, Lyndon Genevieve the elder. So yeah.
Youngest.
Maybe
a notorious rapscallion, or a rake, as he was known as in the book.
Yes. So
that's basically his picture in the book.
Yeah. That is a picture of Lyndon for the most part, and the rake profession is actually like when we were playing, it was a different profession from a different game, but that is what it turned into. And so that's why we can have the guy that can do all these crazy perilous stunts.
That's right. So Lyndon Genevieve the Younger actually plays an interesting role in this new game.
Oh, good.
So over time, he's become a baron of the Rovane Girdle. And during his time, his rise to become a baron, he has done many things, but one thing that Lyndon is known for is he was a notorious womanizer. He was a cheat. He was a real rapscallion. Imagine, if you've seen the movie Rob Roy, the character that Tim Roth plays. Yeah. That essentially is what Lyndon Genevieve the Younger was like in his younger days. And during this time, during his rise to become a baron, because they were kind of a fallen out middling house of burghers. They had captured they'd taken hostage of a rivaling family of a woman named Madeline Dupre. The Dupreys and the Genevieves, or the Jennies as they're called behind their backs, had a long and notorious rivalry betwixt one another, up to and including the death of the Baron Dupre, and they took his daughter hostage. Now, over time, Lyndon, he had sowed his royal oats all across the world, thus the bastards thing. He has many children. He doesn't know them by name, but he knows many children.
Real quick aside, I actually got to play one of his bastards years later.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
This character is probably, at least 8-9 years old at this point.
No idea.
Well, in real time.
Yeah, in real time, I have no idea. It's
been that long since Lyndon's been around. So, but the point I was driving to is that eventually Lyndon and Madeline fell in love, and Lyndon found the one, or so Baron Lyndon thought. Over time, the Genevieve family had taken over a part of the girdle called the Maw. It's near the Steadwall Mountains. It's this place where the reagents that are needed to create pyre shot are reaped from, and then merge with the saltpeter among the hills of Durendal. And they create pyre shot, which has become the formidable weapon that the Eridane, the people of Aglador, have against the North. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But the thing that nobody around the table knows that has happened in the background is that Lyndon Genevieve has been traveling the world. He has maintained Coventry Palanquin, his coaching line across to the Robaine Girdle and Aglador and parts of the north. And they have went through a formal dissolution of the marriage. Madeline Dupre is Baroness, and it is she who rules Durendal. This has created some interesting kind of internal strife within the girdle. So the story will be about primarily the Baroness Madeline Dupre. This is who the story will center all around. Thus the namesake, the Queen of Embers, which you will begin to understand what that means in the series of this long campaign we will play that I anticipate will probably take half a year to a year to complete. Okay. It's a big, long one. It's a fun one. It's being written as we go along, too. So, essentially, what you're going to see as listeners on listeners on YouTube, you will be able to see our adventure crafted from the ground up, and what you see happen around the table will go into the book, and you can purchase that book. You will see us creating a module from the ground up, a whole campaign based in a world you will begin to learn about, with characters and places and religions that we around this table have made over these last 2 decades. Not just my contributions, but the players' major contributions to the story will really be the foundation of this adventure. And I think that's the most interesting part about this, is that we kind of get to define together, not just playtest stuff in Zweihänder, but actually define the story arc, and that becomes the arc we will give to people to purchase. So Madeline Dupre is the Baroness of Durendal, and thus some of the laughter and groans around the table, because there's a long story between the Genevieve and the Dupre that is beyond what we've been spoken about yet, but I don't want to reveal everything because there's a lot that they don't know about. But our story will begin first with the Dufresne Agency. The Dufresne Agency, to talk about them, the best way to talk about them is to compare them to essentially the Pinkertons of the Old West. They are a growing, quote, secret service of bodyguards, spies, political agitators, soldiers, thieves, and worse. Now, granted, over the years, the past half decade or so, they have kind of begun to hone the edge of what the Dufresne Agency means. They actually are a true agency now. A Dufresne agent basically is empowered by the king, the unifier as he is called. Cassander Mouser Unifier has said the Dufresne Agency is an extension of the crown. The Dufresne Agency, the Dufresne Agency coincidentally was founded outside of Durendal at a place called Steed's Hill by a young man named Liam Dufresne, who has deep ties to Durendal. But our story will not be about Liam, or really about the agency. It'll be about who you see around the table. These agents of the Dufresne Agency, these members of it, and they'll all fill specific roles. So we're going to do character creation tonight, and I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to have an open conversation. We're not going to start just rolling dice yet, but let's talk a little bit about kind of some of our thoughts and feelings on how you feel, what you would like to play. Right. A few ground rules for those who are listening. My game world is humanocentric. There's no elves, dwarves, halflings, ogres, any of that stuff. That we are humanocentric, so the ancestral ethnicities you will hear about will be human ethnicities within the game world. And like all game worlds, because we try to mirror, quote, a milieu of a real world, there are racial tensions, there is prejudice, and for those of you who are listening who are uncomfortable with those themes, I suggest not listening, because those will also come to the fore of our conversations. It's not meant to deride or to cause dispersion to real-world races, but just a quick forewarning. Racial antipathy, specifically between human ethnicities, plays a deep role in our game. So, with that being said, let's talk about you guys. Let's talk about the characters. So, we know it's only going to be humans. No magic users. That's off the table too. So no arcane or divine or covenant magic from Main Gauche. These will be grounded in the beginnings of basic tier with a few additional reward points to start.
Okay, so we are going to do basic tier? Okay.
Yes.
Didn't know if we were going up to intermediate.
So, I know we kind of talked a couple weeks ago about what we anticipated maybe playing. Maybe we can kind of revisit some of those things. I need to take some notes.
I think somebody wanted to play a camp follower.
Yes, that was me.
Okay.
So,
You
Nick,
mentioned it.
so you mentioned a camp follower. Why is a camp follower compelling to you?
Well, it's been a while since I've played a ranger in a game, and I kind of wanted to play someone who's a bit more grounded, so to speak. I know that's kind of a cliche word, but I don't usually do accents in when I roleplay, but there have been a couple of times that I've used one, and I'm gonna revisit my accent I used. I don't know, it must have been like 8 or 9 campaigns ago. My first campaign with you, where I played a Gralstetter. But
the Gralstetters.
Yeah, I'm gonna reuse that one, and it's kind of a, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like it's based off of a few people I know, including my father. But it's just, whenever I use it, it kind of makes me think of a working man.
Yeah.
Someone who knows his way around outdoors and can basically fix about anything. And I think a camp follower really fits that archetype. And I think the accent, in my mind, just it fits well with the character archetype I'm going for.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. So, because Gralstetters is one of the human ethnicities in this game world. The Gralstetters live in the north, and they are kind of this weird dichotomy, this mix between the Rovanians, who are the people who live in the Girdle, the Eridane, who live to the west, the kind of French-ish people, and the Gralstetters kind of sit in between them and the Dunish peoples to the north as well. So they're kind of like a hodgepodge of different races that have come together over time, and they formed up their own kind of smaller insular communities. Specifically, what people will know about the Gralstetters is they were driven out of the north during the invasion of the Marcher Lords, which just which just ended. This war in the North just ended. The White Wolf and the Marcher Lords were eventually driven back by King Cassander Mallister, the Unifier, which led to the death of some favored characters around the table, including Lord Balmony's Downton Thorn II, who was Mike's character, died in Stonehold.
And speaking of Gralsteaders, we did briefly mention Gralston in the Dunhallow Mystery.
We did.
We didn't really pull at that thread, so you know, if I had a chance to play Gralsteader again, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. The Gralsteaders will play prominently in this. They actually are refugees in the city of Durendal.
Well, one thing that I think of when I think of Gralsteaders is that what I do love about Mahal is that even though it emulates a lot of European folklore, there are pockets of Americana in it, and the Gralsteaders mainly have
absolutely
Americana accents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're definitely I would agree with that. They're kind of like these rough trade pioneers that lived in isolation, who were essentially drawn into a war they didn't want to fight.
Yeah,
because they were such a small, they're clannish people. But they have fallen under the care, under the wing, so to speak, of Aglador as a whole, and the Rovane Girl has become their new home. They were driven out of the north. They were driven out of the Horn Society. If you remember, they lived beyond the Barrow March. Yep. And that the Horn Society is that giant mountain range beyond where the Picts live. The Picts live, Picts. But regardless, that aside, they have come south, refugees now living along the edge of what is essentially called Skid Row, on the outer edges of Durendal, which it's funny, we were just talking about this before the game. If you look, the comparison essentially is, if you think about Durendal as this kind of growing city, it's surrounded by this shantytown of immigrants and people who were essentially kind of treated somewhat with disdain, but they're like all ethnic groups in older European countries that kind of collect together. The Gralsteaders are like that. They have essentially are refugees from the war, the invasion of the Marcher Lords, and the King, Cassander Mallister, the Unifier, said, bring the Gralsteaders to the Girdle and bring them to Durendal. They may live there. They may relocate there. And they have relocated there literally within less than a year. So they have just relocated. So that's an interesting kind of background on your character and how they kind of fit into the world. I'm really glad you chose Gralsteader, because one of the things I was really focusing on in this story was also talking about like the effects of the social classes, specifically when we talk about other ethnicities that are kind of seen through in a very different way through a medieval world, because they do face some level of prejudice, obviously. Being migrants, they do speak the common tongue, but a very different kind of version of it. And as Adam mentioned, they kind of the kind of profile the Gralsteaders are very pioneer-esque, kind of Americana, kind of how they kind of come out. And that's how. And actually, Nick was the one who kind of had created that whole persona around them. That became that stuck in the game world.
It's a heavy Midwestern accent.
Yeah, very heavy. Which is where we're all from. That's why we pronounce it Zweihänder instead of Zweihänder. So Tim, what were you thinking about playing?
I had two thoughts last week, and I've wanted to play a smuggler since I saw the class, and we've never had a smuggler in any of our characters. Yeah, we've never once. So I've always wanted to play that. But what I think I was gonna try to maybe more focus on was highwayman.
Highwayman, interesting. Okay.
And I thought it's somebody. Basically, he's a. Or he or she or whatever it comes down to. Mostly he's, because I don't do well playing female characters.
I don't know that.
My voice doesn't change.
I think in every game we've played, everybody around the table, save for Mike and you, have played female characters, which is fine.
I played Nastasha for.
Oh, that's right. You did play a female character for many years. I forgot about her. She was
a
part of what became the new.
I'm going to hold out.
Nastasha Steeples.
Yep.
Oh yeah, can't forget about her.
So yeah.
I
was thinking, it's basically instead of using his trademark skills, he's going to use those trademark skills for the king and profit for himself.
Mm-hmm. So the Dufresne agency is a sin. But so how does that? What does that mean as a member of the Dufresne Agency, because he's clear. Your loyalty is still to the Dufresne above all else. That's one thing we must make certain to spell out, is that you may have personal goals and agendas,
right?
But your allegiance is
right.
not to money
faction.
or lucre; it's to the faction, to the Dufresne.
Right. Well, that's I think that's the thing, is he wants to establish himself instead of being the man who's on the fringe of society. He wants to become part of society.
So do you? Okay.
Same thing with that, and that would be my same model for the smuggler.
Right.
Use those unique skills, because I think the smuggler it's kind of the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
You get drive, you get pilot, you get rumor, you get awareness, you get bargain. I mean,
I think that so there's a couple of things to think about.
Okay.
So I think those are both fantastic choices, and I'm going to try to give objective opinions about both. So the highwayman is interesting because it kind of almost says that I live this rough life, but now I'm trying to go legit.
Right.
Basically, your kind of rough trade, you're turning toward becoming I can actually use my powers that were actually unlawful for law.
Which is like it's going against the whole, Zweihander ethos and story, like classic story arc. So it's interesting that you're trying to turn it on its head that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. The reason why, now the opposite, the reason why I like the smuggler is because you get drive and pilot, because we are going to have vehicle combat in this game, featured rather prominently, probably in the first 4 to 5 sessions. Yeah. So some new vehicles that nobody around the table has even seen yet in the game world.
Well, so it's nice that you say that, because a lot of times when you pick a driving type based class, people feel like it's wasted.
Right, coach.
Because you never know what's going to come up in the game.
Coach.
That's right.
Well, or I've played several Outrider. Cavalier.
Don't
We've
have a
played
horse.
several of these, and you don't have a horse, so half your traits are.
So I would say both would make logical sense for what I think. It's great. Those are great story choices, and they also have mechanical implications in the game. But I think more so than anything else, it's going to be a question of which, kind of from an archetype perspective, which would you prefer to play? What sounds cooler in your head? I'm gonna be an awesome smuggler. I'm gonna be an awesome highwayman, because both have different strengths and weaknesses.
Right. And that's why I'm really stuck, and I was stuck. Last time we talked about this, we were all sitting around the table. So I'm still stuck between the two two roles.
Are those both warriors, or is one?
No. One's a knave, and one.
Both knaves.
Are they both knaves?
Yep.
Are they both knaves?
So let's do this.
And I'm trying to stay away from warrior forms.
Knaves.
Let's do this. I suggest let's give Tim some time to flip back and forth between the two professions to kind of see which feels better mechanically in his mind and from a story perspective, and we can move on to Mike.
Okay.
So, Mike, I know we've had some conversations about what you want to play in this game, and I would love to hear kind of where your mind's at.
So, my first character in your world was Hamish, the Harper, or Hamish Claviger.
So Hamish Claviger was a member of an elite unit that served the bastard king of the Rovane Girdle, who, by the way, abdicated the throne.
What?
Huh?
Was that part of the unification
Dominion deal?
Sure was.
Wow, that makes sense.
Yep. He had to retire to his capital of Kael Tyrion, which may or may not figure into the story. I'm not, spoilers, but you may encounter
He was never a king.
It's true. He's a self-proclaimed king, but yes, you were.
He was a warlord who took over a.
Are we talking about Cassandra or the Bastard King?
The Bastard King.
The Bastard King.
Oh, Cassandra's a king.
He called himself a king, although he was no king.
He was no king.
But he had a ton of military might behind him, including his former character Hamish Claviger, which brings us to...
Right, so I was thinking of playing a family member, offspring, something of Hamish.
For the Clavigers?
Okay. The Clavigers. And so he was more of a rural, woodsy guy who ended up, I think it was Targeteer was the name of that profession at the time.
Yeah.
And then champion or something like that. So he was really good at shooting things. But
yeah, Targeteer makes a return in Mangouche.
I think it's Sharpshooter.
Sharpshooter, that's it, right? Sharpshooter, that's right.
So that's why I was looking at the Sharpshooter and man, I should build something that goes Sharpshooter. Because it'd be kind of cool to have that kind of callback to that character.
Well, the beauty is, Mike, with the new updated rules of Mangouche, you can play any profession you want to move into any profession you like, because you can buy skills outside of your profession.
Right. So I was thinking...
Mangash plug. Okay, my shilling is done.
So one of them I was looking at was Outrider.
Outrider's interesting, okay.
Simply because I thought it'd be interesting to have like a kind of a scout navigation kind of guy.
Yeah.
It's always good to have someone who can survive out in the wilderness, even if we're kind of playing a little bit city-centric.
Mm-hmm.
There's always those situations. The other one I was thinking of was Dragoon.
Dragoon, so...
Dragoon's always one you want to play, but doesn't necessarily fit in the setting.
That's right. So, okay, so a couple of comments.
Yeah.
Outrider's interesting. However, I will say that kind of based on our choices so far, you all may feel like fish out of water.
Okay.
Just kind of based around some of the things that are going to happen in the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, if I were to make the choice, I would suggest Dragoon.
Okay.
Because Dragoon, one, nobody's played Dragoon around the table yet. Two,
Yeah.
I think it kind of checks off on some of the things you want to do from a rule perspective, gives you more of a military background.
Okay.
So we need somebody with it.
And three, I think from a perspective of like being a clavager, that drawing up on that long family line in our games, that it will probably satisfy some of the background information maybe for you a little bit more.
Okay.
Now, granted, you can play whatever you want because there's obviously benefits of playing Outrider that a Dragoon doesn't have.
Right.
What's the Dragoon's professional trait?
Dragoon, here comes the cavalry. When you fail a handle animal or ride test, you may re-roll to generate a better result, but must accept the outcome. In addition, when using the movement subtype of ride, you do not have to add the additional 1 AP cost.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
So,
really
in
nice.
Zweihander for mountain combat, it's actually the rules are like there's 2 paragraphs at best, less than 200 words. And one of the things that happens in Zweihander is that you always, like, if you want to sneak while you hustle, add 1 AP. You want to climb while you run, meaning you want to get up that wall real quick, add an additional AP. So if you swim, or you ride, or you hide, or you sneak, or you drive, or you pilot, you always add basically an additional AP as, quote, a rider to do that action and move the same amount of movement you normally would based on your character. So the Outrider has that value. The Dragoon has that. What's the Outrider have?
The Outrider has situational awareness. When you fail an awareness or stealth test, you may re-roll to generate a better result, but must accept the outcome.
Ooh.
So both have re-roll mechanics, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice.
I mean, anytime you can not be, surprised or succeed in awareness, is always nice.
So one thing I'll tell our listeners about, so Mike, a little bit of history on him, he joined our game probably about 6 or 7 years ago now after he moved to Kansas City. And he has been kind of the fulcrum against the mechanics. He helps us identify like overpowered combos. In fact, he's going to talk about like some really cool combos on our Grim Imperialist podcast. He's going to have the Mechanics
Stacks.
Mondays hosted by Mike or Adam.
Mike
right.
and Adam are the stackers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mike is
I'm
our
not
basically.
saying I've already gone to 3rd tier with some of these characters, but I have plans.
Mike is our min-maxer, and it's not a bad thing because he's a great role player. More importantly, he kind of finds kind of chinks in the armor of the rules, which has been super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And he's helped us kind of identify a lot of the early problems in Zweihander along with Adam. So what I'm more interested to hear, because I know the kind of characters you like to play, is that in your mind, I know you have like a weapon type or a thing you want to do with your character.
Yeah.
What is that weapon type or thing you want to do with the character?
Well, so I was thinking, okay, Dragoon is really great because he has both martial and simple range.
Yes.
Also, he has 2 bumps in agility and 2 bumps in combat. So it means you can go either with the bows, which are finesse and use agility, or either your crossbows or your gunpowder weapons with your combat bonus. So he's kind of covered the range spread. Plus, he has coordination, which is a requirement for going into the sharpshooter.
That's right.
So you kind of, when I was looking through it, just kind of narrowed it down to kind of be that perfect fit for what I wanted. So that's what I was leaning towards, but I also did like the Outrider just because, I mean, the awareness, the stealth, you can just go with bows on that guy and just do a lot of long range damage.
So Outrider would be interesting, particularly if you use a crossbow. I don't think we have a character use a crossbow in the game, mostly because they're illegal, or were illegal in Aguilar.
They're very illegal.
And very hard to come by. It was easier to get gunpowder weapons.
Well,
Yeah.
That's the...
a lot of times we would kill bad guys and get a crossbow. That's how that happened.
For our listeners, the way we kind of run the game is that it's like in traditional role-playing games, magic items are like awesome. In this game, it's like, oh my god, I got a crossbow or a gun.
Yeah,
like
gun. I even got the ammo to shoot it.
That's right.
Hey, but just putting it in the in the
Yeah,
front
just-
and walking
That's
around
right.
with it.
It's like you get
scare
the bonus to
people.
intimidate.
Right.
You see what I walked up on this motherfucker in.
Right.
He's got a brace of pistols with no gunpowder, but it's all good. Plus 20 your intimidate.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
So, plus the reload speed on anything besides a normal bow is like 3 or 2 or
Yeah.
more.
Do you have
sometimes.
Arbalest speed as a trait for talent for either of those?
No, Arbalest speed actually is only on a few starting characters.
Bounty hunter.
I don't believe so, actually. I believe it's just
just call
Squire and there was one other, but it was not Bounty Hunter because I haven't played a Bounty Hunter before,
Back then.
and Bounty Hunter is fantastic.
Somebody has one.
No, bounty hunter is
No Mercy,
no mercy,
Saddleborn,
Saddleborn, and take them
It's,
down.
Staying corrected.
yeah. If I hadn't just looked at this morning, I'd probably like, yeah, you're right.
Arbalest speed is
Fantastic.
great.
It's amazing.
It's amazing talent. It's usually reserved for a very few specific
Watchmen.
professions.
Watchmen,
Watchmen.
and which
Watchmen
is
and
another
Squire.
which was another one that I thought about playing, but
Yeah.
Watchman's a great one too. I was looking at him too because Arbalest speed, if you can get that and have
Yes,
coordination and make that roll.
because I thought
Are there
Watchmen
any-
fit better with like a
Nope,
agency.
not main gouge either.
Okay, so there's nothing in the main
trying to
gun.
get away from military.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's.
Actually, sharpshooter has Arbalest speed.
That's what I thought.
I was talking basic though.
Oh, basically.
Regular, I mean, regular professions. So let's do this.
Yes.
Let's let you kind of decide on what you want to do, and we'll move on next to Adam, our rules developer at Grimbrella Studios.
So what I was thinking when we were talking about it the last time was that I've almost always played either one of three things: either a commoner, a healer, or a magic user.
Yep.
So I was thinking maybe it'd be a little bit more interesting to go the martial melee route, and like I have interest in playing a man at arms.
Ooh.
Huh.
Okay.
Man, arms are great.
And I have the heal skill with
Beautiful.
this character as well. So you don't have to be the healer.
Yeah, and
What?
I also don't have to be the one with the crushing guilt when I critically fail to heal somebody.
Well,
Oh, I won't have any guilt.
Oh my god! We just lost a permanent point of Brawn!
Oh, yeah.
Damn it!
I've only been infected multiple times and lost the years. It's
But
okay.
keep doing it hastily. Just
That's right.
Just gotta take your time with it.
As fast as you can.
Yeah.
Just keep going. It doesn't
we're
matter.
in a hurry here. Do it 3 times hastily.
So Man at Arms came to me because you wanted to see the martial melee line. So Man at Arms, is there something else you were considering?
Well, I also am fascinated with like shield, sword and board type of stuff. So that was what I was mainly thinking of. Perhaps a sellsword. Let me
Is
go.
anyone playing anything from Main Gauche?
Well, actually, let's see what warrior professions are in Main Gauche.
Thought I'd just throw that out there.
Cadet, henchman, and scald.
The cadet
Stall.
was pretty fun.
We just had a cadet.
Yeah, I know.
I did try to
You don't want
convince.
to play a bard? You know, musical character?
I tried to
No?
convince Adam
Music
to bring his
thing?
guitar and play a skull, but he
Please.
said no.
Come
He
on.
said no.
The music I write takes several instruments playing at once to make any sense for me. So,
You're just the dude with the lute. You just constantly like strumming, right?
Yeah, just
find
play
out.
Wonderwall. I
But
mean,
that we won't try to convince you otherwise.
sorry, I'm
No
seriously
Wonderwall,
joking.
no Stairway to Heaven.
We need
I'm
to create a
joking.
troll character and you can play it. That way you can be our loot troll.
No,
maybe someday. Maybe perhaps.
maybe never.
So,
No,
so
if
you
it was
maybe.
maybe never, I would say that.
so you spoke about Man at Arms and a sellsword.
Yeah.
Why sellsword?
Because
Such a great
I
profession.
I do like some of their. I mean, I love their professional trade. Like,
Yeah.
and I know.
Ignore moderate injuries. What?
Yeah, and then you get the talent on top of it that
Yeah, ignore
ignores.
serious.
Serious? Yeah.
Well, no, it's the other way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
flip 'em,
yeah,
right.
I mean, that's cool.
Die Hard, I think it's called.
I wanted to, but the main reason I wanted Man-at-Arms is because I believe that's the profession that's the closest to being a tank. Because no matter what, I do like somebody that can definitely support other people.
Man-at-Arms is definitely a heavy support character.
Yeah.
Sellsword's a little bit more linear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not very dynamic because they are literally built for war.
Yeah.
So if you were to use this in D&D terms, a sellsword's an alpha striker. A Man-at-Arms is a defensive tank.
Yes.
Yes.
So is there anything else that's kind of compelling about those two professions to you?
To be honest, I hadn't given it too much thought. I really wanted to try martial melee because I don't
think you played anything with martial melee before.
No, I've done martial ranged with Ulysses, which was a lot of fun.
You mean Ulysses?
Odysseus.
You played a brawling character a couple.
Yes, but that was simple melee.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I've played warriors, but it's almost always simple melee when I do.
He likes to punch things in the face.
Quick asterisk and a caveat here. Although we've spent 7 years playing Zweihänder in some form or another, we have not played every profession in the book.
No.
Really?
That's impossible.
Because there's all one shots.
There's 100 of them plus.
Well, and there's a lot of magic users, and we play a very low magic.
That's right.
World. There is magic, but it's low.
Right.
Well, let's do this. So, Adam, while you're considering that, let's go back. Let's go back to you, Tim.
I gave you cookie in.
So you were is between smuggler or highwayman. Do you have a kind of after reading what you did in the book? Do you have a kind of a sentiment one way or the other?
Smuggler.
Mike's whispering smuggler.
Well,
they're so good.
Han shot first.
Han shot first.
Let's do this. Let's let the listeners hear about what's the smuggler's professional trait.
I want to get back to it. I'm sorry. I started. It is Han shut first. Every smuggler is ruthless at heart, resorting to villainy when the situation necessitates. When combat begins, you gain 3 AP that must be used immediately at the top of the initiative order, even if you were surprised. So basically, I guess I can finish it. Once spent, determine your place in the initiative ladder, and then take your turn normally. If there are 2 or more smugglers smugglers are present, then the one with the highest goes first.
Right. So essentially, you go first no matter what. You get 2 turns at the beginning of combat, not maybe back to back, depending on how you roll the initiative ladder.
Right.
But a smuggler will go at the very beginning, no matter what, even if they're surprised. They get 3 AP to where they want.
Even if there's a watchman, which is the other thing that Watchman's amazing about. Right?
Yeah,
Watchman gets 2d10 for initiative.
Yeah.
Oh man,
you're always at the top of the initiative.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yep.
That was definitely one of my.
And that's persistent. 5. Whereas a smuggler is like you kind of get that alpha moment. You get that alpha strike moment. If you need to duck for cover, if you need to ready a weapon, if you need to use some fast talking, essentially you can do what you need to do first. And that's drawn from the Empire Strikes Back. Is that right?
Yeah.
No, not Empire Strikes Back. It's drawn from Star Wars.
So it's the Han Solo guy.
Yeah, Han Solo shoots Greedo.
Yeah.
That's right. Han shot first. So
it's like, hey, I was just about to come see you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's the smuggler. What about the highwayman's professional trait, which is pretty awesome too?
I just took a big bite of one.
I always like the highwayman because it has that really cool picture of the dude with the bandana over his face.
Yeah. And it makes me think of like, the Missouri-Kansas War here.
Oh yeah.
Because of the Bushwhackers.
The Bushwhackers. That's right. That figures heavily into Missouri and Kansas history.
It is. All right. Stand and deliver. Whether robbing from the rich or exacting from the poor, or simply robbing for their own gain, highwaymen always find purchase for their. Is it quips?
Yeah.
Quips.
With their quips when they can be bought for or afforded when defending themselves. At your option, you may substitute charm skill in place for intimidate. In addition, you may substitute the charm in place for any skill required to parry melee weapons.
So they rely on their charm and wry wit and fast quips to kind of cause, in this case, they use it to kind of cause like a moment for an opponent to kind of slip out of the way of weapons. So as opposed to using traditionally, you would use whatever weapons in your primary hand to parry, but instead they can use wry whips and quips, to kind of like evade, because they're basically kind of messing with their opponent constantly. They're constantly poking and prodding, wear them down, and use that to their defensive advantage.
They also get a skill rank in charm.
Which is probably helpful, maybe, in this game, because we have nobody with any fellowship-based skills.
Yeah. I have always wanted to play one because I think... Did you play one?
No, I played a...
Nobody has played.
I played a smuggler a long time ago.
No one's played a highwayman. No.
You played a smuggler. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you did play a smuggler.
Yeah, it was like a starting career when we were doing the haunted house one.
But remember, guys, this happens every time.
Yeah.
We do a campaign. We always need somebody to pilot a boat, drive something, and we never have anybody that does it.
Well, I think...
But yeah, it is a very limited skill use.
I think that you would have a lot of fun with the smuggler, particularly if
I will have more fun with the highwayman because he's got more the melee stuff and the range.
Yeah.
He's got martial range, and then simple range and melee. So
I think you should play what you want.
I say go
play what you want.
But
Because
and strangely enough, they have education, which I think is
they're higher born.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though they may have turned to a life of crime and villainy, much like the story of Robin Hood, they are generally well educated.
Yeah.
We can kind of talk about character background after that, but I say you do a highwayman because keep this in mind: your second profession can be smuggler. There's nothing prohibiting that. You can you're kind of waffling between some of these professions, but you can move to the other one. Your next
play both.
Your next tier.
Yeah.
You can play both.
True. That is true.
That is a great system.
Yeah, I'll go highway.
All right.
Because we've never really and I'm gonna really have to work on that charm parry. But I think I can do that. I think I can do that.
Just be Spider-Man.
Well, remember.
Well, yeah.
You're using charm in place of intimidate, so you don't have to necessarily be charming. You can just be annoying.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's,
like you said, Spider-Man.
Oh, done, Dan. That was my planning.
Oh, done. I'm already there. So yeah, you're good. So
Spider-Man.
The highwayman obviously has. You clearly have some sort of education, like You are all from the girdle, so as an example, Nick is a Gralstetter, so he's a refugee. Mike is a Clavager, so he's Rovanian.
Yeah, no question.
I thought they were Rovanian.
They are Rovanian.
He just said Rovanian.
Oh, there's sorry.
No, Eridane.
No, there's an Eridane for some reason.
No,
they're not Eridane.
The Clavagers are Rovanian, so they're the most populous ethnic group in the Rovane girdle, self-same. In the girdle. It's the reason why it's called the girdle, because it actually skirts the entirety of the country, east and west, from both the east march to the west march, which you'll see on a map that'll accompany this first podcast once we get it out there. But the Rovanians are these kind of industrious people who've been here for a couple hundred years and kind of eked out what essentially was a pioneer existence, but they're very industrious people, so they kind of built up a society for themselves. They kind of are seen in some ways by their Eridane cousins to the west as kind of a mockery or lower born. Folksy, yeah, simple.
Rule.
But they're nothing like that. They're incredibly pragmatic and hardworking. That's at least the stereotype. Not every Rovanian's painted with the same brush, but if there's one thing to say about the Rovanians is they are incredibly pragmatic and they are very hardy and have withstood a number of terrible things in the world as time has went on, including internal civil war called the Strife, but that's for another story.
I mean, the Eridane Rovanian thing goes back to the vassal state thing.
It does, yes, that's right.
Lower than me because you pay homage to me.
That's right. So to the west of a river called the Axewater lives the Eridane in a country called Aglador, which technically also includes the Rovane Girdle, because the Rovane Girdle is actually a military region. It belongs to Aglador. It falls beneath its borders, but it's still kind of seen and revered as a separate area. So the Eridane populated Aglador, and they can trace their lineage back to the first shore, which is the deep, long history in the game world of Mahal. We won't talk about that, it's not important. But it does speak to what Tim was saying, which is the Eridane and Aglador saw the Rovanians and the Rovane Girdle as a vassal state, as their lessers. And that led to a war about, I think it's about 20-something, well, almost 20 years ago now, called the Strife. But that the sentiment of that war has kind of been stamped out over time because greater things have happened, up to including the last cataclysm, which we will learn about in the game. Because essentially, when we talk about Mahal, we're really talking about what happens in a medieval world when the end of the world is coming. How do people react to that? How did the country survive? How do people live with that? But we'll learn more about that in the game. But yes, so you're a Rovanian. So you come from the Girdle. You're the Clavigers, which is a well-known Rovanian house. Your father would have been a man named... what was his first name? Splendid Claviger.
Oh.
Or as he was known as the Paladin, as he was called. He made a pilgrimage from the north to the south, barefoot, to seek penitence for the wrongs of his noble blood, which was descended from the house Agravar, which figured into our last campaign too. And he is now the bearer of one of the badges of office. Essentially, in Aglador, and ostensibly the Girdle, those who can trace their blood back to the first shore, each of those houses have a sword or other replicas of badge of office. As an example, he has earned Penitent, which is a badge of office. In Durendal, the Baroness has her badge of office, which is the sword Durendal, the namesake of the town, or Durham's really called the Anvil by people who live there.
Right.
But so your father is the bearer of Penitent. You have a long lineage behind you. Clearly, your brother fought during the invasion of the Marcher Lords. Mm-hmm. You probably don't have any wartime history at this point. Now, Nick's character, the character, does.
Right.
You're a refugee. You fled, essentially. Mm-hmm. So that brings us to Tim's character, because this is where I was leading to. So you're the only character in the group, I believe, who has education as a skill rank, right? So it's possible that you were probably born of an even higher stock than those around you. It's possible you could be from the West. You could be Eridane, as an example.
Make me whatever you want. I don't, I play well looking at everyone as my lesser.
What? No way. I think that's beneath you, Tim.
It is, actually. It is.
Well, certainly not above him.
Nothing is above.
Right. So,
my reflexes are too fast. I would catch it.
So the interesting thing about the Dufresne Agency is that even they were founded in Steed's Hill, outside of Durendal, their headquarters is all the way to the west in the holy city of Roaline, which figured into a former campaign of ours too. The holy city, the city of Roaline is essentially kind of the Vatican, so to speak, of the Dominion. It is there that the Holy Father Ulith the Unswerving has arisen as the new Holy Father of the Faith of the Covenant.
Because Blucard died.
Blucard went mad and died.
Yeah.
The former Holy Father, but that doesn't figure into our story. But it is during that time that the Dufresne Agency established themselves as a true factional organization empowered by the Cassandra Malister, the Unified, and you probably rode from the west to here. You all will have a greater mission that will drive the thrust of the story, and we will cast the adventure when it comes out in written format too, to make the characters that players create, who are listening, who will eventually play this on their own, to create their own characters that belong within this agency too. So that brings us to Adam.
Yep.
What you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm wanting to stick with Man-at-Arms because they get those really cool shield talents too. Like
Sword
board.
Sword.
What's the Man-at-Arms professional trait?
When engaged with an ally and they fail to parry or cannot do so, you may immediately parry in their stead for 1 AP. If successful, they suffer no damage, and neither do you. You must have a shield in hand in order to use this trait. So
Cool.
yeah, I haven't done martial melee stuff and shields.
Well, guess what, Adam? You're not getting a shield when you BM because this is Zweihänder. You get to steal one.
You gotta fight for one.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just kidding. I'm just kidding. You actually get a barrel lid for a shield.
Oh, cool.
No, you get a shield.
What barrel?
Like, no, seriously,
It is
like,
Zweihänder.
What do you have?
it
I have a
works.
lid of a barrel.
Nothing would surprise
It would not.
You barely have a shield.
When I get heavy boots to start this game, I am like,
I know, right? Heavy boots.
I'm like, I got a pair of heavy boots.
And
Dang.
yeah, I can walk around
I
outside.
must have
I
been-
don't get typhoid when I get there.
Dan must be feeling really, really generous tonight.
Right.
No,
It's like he's trying to suck up to someone.
there's new diseases in Bangladesh. One is called war fever, which is what dissidents and
Dysentery.
dysentery, all kinds of. It's like it's an overall word for just like a sickness that spreads throughout war camps.
Filth
and
fever.
migrant communities.
Trench foot.
Filth fever is not the
Trench
same.
foot.
War fever is different. War fever is like it's actually.
So it's like dysentery, trench.
No, it's actually it's a type of typhoid, I believe, that you get
Oh,
like
off the
pockmarks. People got it in like the trenches in World War II.
Yeah, yeah.
They call it. It's called war fever.
So
Anywho,
too close.
So
Was
should we
that?
call you Typhoid Marty?
So
Marty.
Adam, unlike other people around the table, has a tendency to cling to a accent.
Yeah.
that,
What and like the accent I would choose to play would probably be depending on which family I would be playing as. I definitely want to play as an established family. I don't know which one, but you know whether that's Coventry, Genevieve, Reading. I mean, there's.
That's a good question. Are there more Linden's bastards or Reddings in the world?
Oh, I don't know.
that's
Are they
that's
like-
really hard. That's
Very
a
good
It's
question.
like asking how many licks does it take to get to this.
Well, okay,
It's
so-
Tootsie Pop. Well, by the time you answer the question,
When
another bastard has been spurted into
Yeah.
some poor maiden.
right.
That's the Clevenger, the Genevieve, Lyndon Genevieve the Younger, and the Reddings are very prolific.
Their
And
seed is strong.
brazenly so.
Right, so it's just how many names start with C. That's how many Reddings there are.
So
Okay, yeah.
I like the idea of maybe thinking out playing perhaps Old Iron Eye was your grandfather,
oh, so a Forester.
a forester, yes.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, yeah. I would love that.
So
I'll-
for those who are listening,
Yeah.
Iron Eye was like this. He was like played by a guy named Jeremy Jones, who was a contributor and a playtester for Zweihänder, and he played Iron Eye. And they called him that because he had an iron eye patch. He's this old angry man.
Yeah,
Basically, what was that movie that Clint Eastwood was in? That he was like he had retired from a life of gunfighting, was brought back out for one last hurrah.
Unforgiven.
Unforgiven. He was basically Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven. He was kind of
Nah.
he was an old war vet that went mad. Like he became a firebug. He was like possessed
Yeah, he
by.
did.
do I get to burn things?
Yeah, but he lived a short empiric life. No pun intended.
Well,
But he and his son and his daughter had established a very radical left-wing antagonizer unit with the Bastard King, and Iron Eye died some number of years later.
yeah, he was actually really close to Lyndon Genevieve.
That's right.
But somewhere where we left off in the story is that eventually we would have to come to the field of battle because he wouldn't leave who he was serving because we were starting to lean another way, and I can't remember how it turned out exactly, but
So that means Dismas Forrester is your father,
okay.
which makes you Rovanian.
Yes.
We can
Well-
talk about names later.
Right.
But so you're a Rovanian, you're Aradane.
And you could just make me from Bellegame. I mean,
Belgame's
was-
more.
that's what I'm saying. That's the reason.
That's interesting.
I mean, honestly, there how many
wow.
formal
Yeah.
rich houses, and that's
Oh, yeah.
that's why I turned into a highwayman.
Right.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
I like that.
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought
I
that
lost
up.
my home, my wealth, my standing.
Yeah, so maybe maybe you were probably at that point probably not really on the up and up in the first place, which is interesting. I'm looking up the wiki real quick we use internally to determine how long ago this would have happened.
Well, or the White Wolf. I mean, all that was going on, right? Which has only been... That was all kind of culmination together, right?
Yeah, it all kind of happened along the same time.
Right.
To give you an idea...
Within 3 to 5 years, basically.
Yeah, it was like, boom, invasion. Fuck.
Right.
Yeah, so the timeline for both us around the table and listeners, we'll show you a little bit more about this with an actual timeline that we'll have eventually. But let me talk about the chronology for a moment. So here's what's happened. This is the third age. The current year is 223. So this means, to walk back in history, in the year 223 is when the King's Moot happened, when they established the Dominion, basically an alliance of multiple countries, headed up by the new Holy Father and Roeline. Prior to that, in 221, was the last cataclysm. That's when the blood moon had been turned to cinders in the sky and now rotates around all of Mahal, much like Saturn, like it's a ring of rock that can be seen during the day and the night. That was 1 year ago. So in year 220, which is 3 years ago, was the invasion of the Marcher Lords. That was a little bit prior to the destruction of Bellegane. So right during when the White Wolf and the Marcher Lords had invaded Gralstead and parts of the north of Aglador, that's when everything happened.
Right.
Oh, so this is all recent.
So
within 3 years.
So 3 years. As large as the country of Aglador is, it would take time. It's taken you it took them over 1.5 years to basically get to Durindal.
Yes.
So 2 years. The 3 years that I've been raping and pillaging these people as they move along the highway to.
Yeah.
Well, the last time we played Defray,
I know a lot about
we actually had to
Gralsteaders.
dodge White Wolf guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the invasion had not yet ended. Remember, it was all happening concurrently.
Yeah.
Right. And the last time we played Defray
3 years would be work.
We were in Bellegane when the last cataclysm happened.
That's right. When the Blood Moon had been destroyed for ulterior bad motives we won't talk about on the podcast yet. But that led to the destruction of Bellegane. That led to the ascendancy of the Dufresne Agency. And in short time, after the establishment of the King's Moot, literally within months of 223, they crushed the White Wolf. They drove him out of Aglador. The Marcher Lords retreated. So this happened literally within months of the time today.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason the White Wolf even established a foothead is because the entire country was in disarray because the capital had just been blown up.
Yeah,
destroyed. Let's just use the word destroyed because I don't know the...
To the north, essentially, the country of Dunbrud is separated by Dalriada, which was where the Gralsteaders were from, in Hivernia. And Hivernia and Dalriada had been at war. And the king, or the brood, as they're called, the brood is the king of the north. No, not a Game of Thrones reference, by the way. There are two kings in Dunbrud. One of the kings fell, and his bastard son, the White Wolf as he was known, Hannibal Kincaid, aligned all the dissidents from the other country, called the Marcher Lords, and stormed south into Aglador, and just rampaged all along the countryside, came as close to Cael Gareth Lyn, the capital of Aglador, but were driven back by Cassander Mallister, and then the Dominion was formed. Boom. We need to ally with our northern allies. We need to ally with the south. So the Dominion was formed.
Happen.
This literally happened within a period of 6 months to now. So this news is just now spreading from Aglador to the east. Many people probably in small villages in Girdle probably still believe it's still a time of war.
Well, you could maybe from any of the major cities that were sacked from the White Wolf.
That's right.
And I turned to.
Cael Moray
I turned to crime to feed myself and to keep my lifestyle the way that I like.
That's right. So that kind of drives the reason why Tim was eventually you were absorbed at some point in the Dufresne Agency for some reason.
Well, yeah, because I want to try again. As I said, I think
Right.
the easiest way to take either one of those character arcs and say they want. I mean, there's no life in crime forever.
Right. But
and a wise crime person knows that,
Yeah,
right?
Right. But keep in mind, though, a highwayman is not a killer.
No.
They are a robber.
Robber.
They're an elite robber. They see themselves as I'm not a mere petty thug. I am a robber of a higher caliber and state. So, is it possible then that maybe that moment where you actually killed somebody led you to turn toward?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a kind of
Maybe I had to kill myself in defense, even though I was really robbing them.
Right. Maybe you robbed the wrong wagon train.
Right.
That's right. Or maybe you robbed the right one, and whatever the reasons may be, not for good or for ill, but there had to have been something that said, okay, I need to turn toward a life of law and order. Use my, kind of like use your bad history to support what happened. So
Okay.
we'll work that out in the game,
Okay.
right? We'll let that story come about
Right.
through the character stories. But it's important to note we need reasons why you were part of the agency. You can't just be some random dude from the north. There must be a reason why you are with the agency, because that perhaps is more important than who you are playing on paper, your mechanics. That's going to be a very important pieces that will figure into the story in the game, because you all will have something that is at risk. Much like what we talk about, like how do you make characters care about the story and the players and the people within it? Everyone will have their different reasons, but we have to have those things that are at risk to ground you in the story, to ground you into the world. So we'll talk about that after we kind of establish kind of on paper what we're playing. So that brings us to. Actually, I think you just need to pick your profession.
I went with Dragoon.
Dragoon? Okay, cool. All right, you're a Clevenger. All right, so we have...
Do we know what Salty Walt's doing?
We don't, but we'll figure that out in between sessions, and
Okay.
he'll join us. So here's what we have. So Nick will be playing a camp follower who is a Gralstetter, and basically a refugee who is part of the agency. We will have Tim, who is playing a highwayman, who is an Aridane man from the west. We have Mike, who will be playing a Dragoon. He is Rovanian, that is his ethnicity, and he is of the House Claviger, a old house of the Girdle. And then we have Adam, who will be playing a man-at-arms, who is also Rovanian, but he is from another house of people, a middling house called the Foresters, who has also a deep history within the Girdle. So before we start rolling dice, let's talk about, and you need to decide this. Why the four of you? Why not specifically why you're in Durendal? I'll explain that. But in the first real session. But why did you individually come to the agency? What would have attracted the agency to you, more importantly? You didn't just like say, hey, I'm here to sign up for the agency and check the box. You had to have had some sort of history with the agency prior to this. Now granted, you're still newbies, greenhorns, lobies in the agency, and you're essentially agents, but all in name. You still need to make a name for yourself. You still you've not earned any rank whatsoever within the agency. You are basically footmen, for lack of a better term.
I think I have an idea as to why I'm in the agency. I was strongly urged to go to the agency by my father, who had had dealings with them before.
Good dealings, bad dealings?
Well, both. Because, I mean, we are foresters after all. Nothing is completely a good dealing with us. We're very temperamental. But the last group of investigators that he worked with did help solve a whole bunch of murders.
Yeah,
in his city that he was
That's right.
in charge of.
That's right. Your father, Dismas Forrester. That's
Mhm.
right.
Yeah. So,
Forgot about that.
Sort of
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
it's not that I was derelict in my duties, but this type of family seems like no matter how good you are at your duties is going to be you should probably be doing more.
Yeah.
So prove yourself. Go work at the different agency or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got like my father's approval to live up to, whether I want it or not. I haven't decided yet, but
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, the Foresters are pretty mercurial people. They make a lot of enemies and very few allies. they're incendiary, one could say. Not just because their grandfather is looked at as literally a serial arsonist who burns people alive on the battlefield.
Prisoners. It was.
That was an honest mistake, right? No, he actually gave into his disorder, which he threw a barrel of pitch into a prison wagon and tossed a torch inside, burning everyone.
Yeah.
Not just prisoners, good and bad prisoners, people who they were supposed to save. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the wagon crashed, and that was fun.
I think my character died at that point.
Yeah, we had several fate points were spent during that period.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's good. You have a reason. We don't need to know all the details. This is important. Have a high level, 10,000 foot view of what brought you to the agency. So, what about you, Tim?
I think I'm gonna rely on the second chance. I'm looking for a second chance in life, and us wealthy, we get actually a third chance in life. So
that's right.
I'm maybe there's I don't want to use. I was going to use the family tie. Maybe that the family has used the Dufresne agency in the past too, but he's already used that, so I can't use that. Yeah,
it's possible that your family has employed the Dufresne for one reason or another. I mean, the Dufresne aren't. If you watch Deadwood, you look at the Pinkertons. The Pinkertons range from a school marm who was training this small girl who was actually a spy for Alma's family to literal thugs in the street, armed guards. So the Dufresne agency is not so dissimilar. They kind of take in people who are worthwhile, and while a common criminal would be turned away and probably hung by the local constabulary, this would probably be an opportunity where you get that second, or in this case, maybe third chance because you were born of noble blood. You were an Aridane after all, and you were given not only your life back, but an opportunity to
wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting to look at from a alignment perspective.
Yeah.
You should pick some cool alignments for that. So let's move next to Nick.
So
you're a Gralstetter, you're a refugee.
Yeah.
So
refugees are typically, especially if they're ethnically different from the rest of the people in the area, like looked down upon. A lot of prejudice. And I know the prejudice is like a very big theme that we kind of come back to over and over again. So I think that this character would be attracted to the Dufresne agency because they seem to be an agency that somewhat put that sort of thing aside. A lot of people, different types of people are welcome. And I think this character would think that his ethnic group having a say in things is a good thing.
That's interesting. So if you remember Brotherhood of the Wolf, if you've seen this movie before, there was this Native American character named Mani that the Frenchmen had brought back from the New World with him. And people treated him with disdain, but Mani was seen as a trusted friend, companion, despite who he was, despite the prejudice the world had against him. So you may want to think about in this perspective that you as a Gralstetter, you clearly had to be a standout above the others. You're not just some normal immigrant. You probably have reasons why the Dufresne agency would be attracted to you. It's possible you may have been a leader of some type in Gralstead. Maybe you were one of the people who helped kind of lead the people to Durendal, and the Dufresne agency saw that you stood out essentially as somebody who understood the wider world, who had a worldliness to them that perhaps the Ravanians and Aridane do not.
Do you still have the notes for that old campaign back then?
Absolutely. It's on the wiki.
I know that Vernon had a rival in Gralstead.
He did.
I can't remember his name, but that would be a good choice.
So he was Vernon's rival.
Yes.
That's interesting.
I can't remember his name, but I think that would be a good fit.
Cool. Makes sense. I'm on board. Okay, so that brings us to Mike. What brought you to the agency, or what brought the agency to you?
So I think my character would have grown up with stories of his uncle, being part of the Harpers, being part of that military, like, elite kind of group, and I think he would have idolized him for that. And seeing as the Bastard Kings kind of know more as a military thing, like the Harpers, I think he would kind of see the Dufresne as his chance to kind of walk kind of the path that his uncle did, to where he could kind of display his abilities, that he's learned through being a claviger, and kind of work his way up through the Dufresne to a more renowned. Because he's got a lot of people to live up against. His uncle, his father.
Yeah.
So I think he'd probably just be trying to make his own steps, and then sees that the Dufresne are kind of the up and coming easiest way to rise.
That's good. That's good. You had mentioned moving to sharpshooter, and the reason why I think this is kind of relevant, I'm getting to this in just a moment, there's actually a mechanical and story reason. So the Clavigers are a very religious family.
Yeah.
The sharpshooter actually has a drawback.
Yeah.
That you gain chaos ranks when you
Anytime
kill
you
people
an
and
innocent
innocent
person,
people.
yeah.
So it's possible that your faith and fealty to your family to stand above, to kind of, because you're kind of living in the shadow of these very monumental figures.
The paladin,
right? My great uncle or my grandfather was the paladin, right?
Paladin.
He was the paladin.
Right.
There's only one paladin.
It's not paladin as in D&D. He was called the paladin, right?
There's only one in our entire group. Well, and then way back.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's interesting. Because if you're kind of trying to make that name for yourself, the Dufresne's a really good group to kind of align yourself with and to kind of make that name. But I think it's interesting to think about for the perspective of how faith shapes your interactions. Maybe think about that as maybe a character kind of thought. You can move that game. Sorry,
I've got to move it. It's bothering me.
You can move it out of the way or whatever. It's fine.
No, as long as I can lean back.
There's new boxes up in the windows to put board games. I haven't moved them up there yet.
You're a leaner.
You're a leaner.
Gotta lean back.
Yeah. All right,
So, okay, this is great. So here's what I suggest. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Use a restroom, and then we'll start rolling characters.
Roll them dice.
By the way, this is fantastic how this came together. This is the first time we ever recorded a session 0, and it's always good. This, to me, this felt much more natural than what we were doing with the Curse of Strahd.
We had a lot of character history to pull off of. I think that's what helps.
Yeah, that's really that was the kind of the reason why Curse of Strahd didn't feel right, is because it wasn't in the campaign world with characters we knew.
Right.
That didn't work. So, listeners, you may get a chance to get a peek at some of those sessions. It was kind of a failed experiment on our part to run Zweihänder with Curse of Strahd. Basically, the game suffered from a lot of D&D-isms that I couldn't resolve, and it kind of led to a poor story. But that's another topic altogether. But actually, that's what drove us to start this new thing, using this tentatively titled Queen of Embers adventure campaign. So we will be right back in 5 minutes.